Welcome back to everybody, and welcome back to this new IULM Flow appointment on behalf of IULM. And we are really pleasure to have today again in our course, Leadership and Creative Thinking, our student, our IULM student. And today we have a new guest, Professor Philip De Salvo, that he will discuss with us about some idea connected with media, journalism, the dark side of these media activities, and then we will have a proactive Q&A question with a student that they will ask to Philip some opinion, provocation. Why we do this? We do this because, first of all, it's a course in leadership and creative thinking, but because we are here to explore more or less three main questions. Why we do create, why we do preserve, and why we do destroy. Based on this cyclical question, it's my pleasure, let me stop my screen, to say welcome to Professor Philip De Salvo, that he will be with us from the University of Switzerland, professor, postdoc, expert, scholar in media and journalism. Philip, welcome to, and thanks so much to join the conversation.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight. So thanks for having me.
And first of all, thanks also to the students, because these activities, we, like you, we organize several activities like this, but this is a kind of format in the format, because in this IULM Flow format, we have this proactive conversation with what I call future talent or future creative talent. That's why it's really important. Thanks so much, because you accept also the risk to be part on this. In this case, I think that we can start. The first part is led by you, Philip. Please, thanks so much to join us in the conversation, and we are really happy to listen from your perspective. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. So let me just share my my screen until we can start. All right. I hope you see my presentation in full screen. So tonight we're going to discuss technological black boxes and how this phenomenon is reflected in the visibilities and invisibilities of the Datafied Society. I was already way too much nicely introduced, but I am a researcher for 70% of my time, and the remaining one I spend it on conducting journalistic activities. I'm based mostly at the Institute of Media and Journalism, the Università della Svizzera Italiana in Lugano, where I do research about journalism in particular and how it is interconnected with other regards of today's contemporary life, in particular technology, and more in particular in how journalism is becoming increasingly influenced by hackers and other irregular actors of today's informational ecosystem. So I will touch on some of these points during my presentation, but I think it makes sense to define firstly what is the Datafied Society. Well, if we look at our contemporary reality, we live in a society which is more and more influenced and sometimes even governed by technological powers, and in particular by data-oriented decision-making and big data. In particular, in this context, we are constantly facing a reality made of what? Made of data collection, data analysis, and in many cases also data monetization. So our entire life produces data, and in this context of the Datafied Society, this data is very important for various regards. Firstly, and we will see some example because it is an interesting and very powerful source of income for big technological companies, and in another regard instead, they are a pure gold mine when it comes to surveillance, both in an economical term and in political one also at the same time. So basically, the Datafied Society was built around very positivistic view on the capabilities of big data, on the capabilities of digitalization, and its own digital and data-oriented platform. So for years, it felt like we were going to live in a way better world, more transparency, more equal, more accessible, and more fair. In reality, there were already a few years ago some critical questions that should have been posed to the actual functioning, to the actual identity of big data. Well, big data and anything Datafied Society, it's not by itself positive, it's not by itself negative, but it's also by itself not neutral. So anything that has data at the core and data analysis and surveillance in particular should be always questioned in order to try to avoid having way too much optimistic view about the capabilities and potential of the technology and still have room for asking critical questions in regards to big data. Here I'm quoting Dana Boyd and Kate Crawford, two of the most important scholars in the field of datafication and technology on data. And they already in 2012 were asking this critical question about the context and the inner functioning of big data that in many cases have been too easily defined in positivistic views. But this talk today is also about invisibility, and invisibility is something that is obscure, it's something that is kept secret, but it's also something that is dark. And despite all the positivistic view about big data and technological impact of these technologies on society, we actually, according to philosopher James Bridle, we live in a way and in a world that it's by definition very opaque. We have no real idea in some cases around how this technology works. We don't have access to the inner functioning of the digital platforms, for instance, and to most data analysis frameworks and data analysis technologies. And to most of the people, these technologies are beyond comprehension. They are not very easily understandable in critical ways, and in sometimes they are very secretive in how they operate and in how they are implemented into reality. So also in the title of this talk, I've included black box as a metaphor for today technologies, and of course, I'm not the person who invented the metaphor of the black power, of the black box that comes from this great book that I really suggest you to take a look at. It's called The Black Box Society, and it was written in 2015 by sociologist Frank Pasquale. He defined black box in regards to various realities of today's public life. It is in the context of economy, it is in the context of technology, and also in the context of policy. But if you think of the black box, I'm pretty sure you would think about those who are installed into airplanes and that are able to record anything that happens during a flight. And that's precisely the direction in which the black box metaphor is oriented. Most or the majority and the most powerful technologies connected to big data or connected to commercial surveillance are absolutely black box. It means that they have the capabilities of recording anything that happens in the context where they are installed, but at the same time, it's very difficult or even impossible for people to have a look inside these black boxes and see how they actually work. So in particular, big data and surveillance technologies can be used for express power. They can be used for control, and they can have inner powers of decision making or to influence public discourse at large. So the black box metaphor really explains these conditions of being constantly monitored without having access to how this technologies actually work. And in this area, I think that the role of journalism is very much needed, and it's probably even more important than ever, because black box technologies by themselves are a form of power. We will see in a minute some examples of what I mean here. But if you think, for instance, to the big corporations in the Silicon Valley, they express a lot of power in technological and computational potentials. They are very capable of expressing power through their own system. If you think of Facebook or Google, these are eminently very powerful entities, very powerful companies. And where there is power, there is always an interesting hint for journalists. And power is power, even when we refer to it in digital terms. So in this sense, I think that accountability and investigative watchdog reporting is very important, because we need to challenge these powers. We need to look inside how they work in order to understand the real impact of them on society. And in this sense, and this is what we are going to discuss shortly, computational journalism is absolutely pivotal and very important when it comes to actually investigate the power of technologies. And in this context where journalism is really in a very open phase, it is being very open to external influences, we will see how journalists in this context of investigating technologies can have a very powerful hand for other actors like whistleblowers or confidential sources, and even other actors like activists and hackers. But first of all, let's start by mentioning at least three of what I think are technological black boxes in the Datafied Society. The first one is algorithmic power of social media platforms when it comes to, for instance, moderating and even censoring in some time content. What we see on Facebook is constantly moderated, it is constantly monitored, and editorial decisions are taken by algorithms automatically about what you are going to see on the platform. And in this sense, this is a form of power that is expressed through technological tools like algorithms, but the impact of the actions of algorithms can have very profound impact on society, and in the case of Facebook, for instance, on speech. The second black box is how states conduct surveillance over the internet, and how states share among them the content of their surveillance activities on the citizens. And third, a point I would like to touch with you tonight is the commodification of surveillance technology, which means that it's even easier than in the past to buy, implement, and install surveillance technologies in public spaces, or to use them against activists and journalists. And in face of these black boxes, in face of this very obscure technological conditions and technological context, journalists have responded to the task. They have started conducting investigation into these three areas that I was mentioning you. Well, the first response to this black box situation is to be found in how journalists can cooperate with whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are sources who, from inside an institution, decide to reveal secrets or information that may have a value for the public. This has happened in many contexts in the history of journalism, but recently we have seen more whistleblowers speaking up from inside Silicon Valley companies. This is the most recent example from last week. A Facebook whistleblower named Sophie Zhang has revealed to The Guardian some loopholes in the policies of Facebook that that have been exploited by non-democratic political leaders around the world. So we have seen how an investigation into a very powerful digital company started from the contribution of an insider who was able to reveal to journalists details of very politically impactful actions of Facebook. And then, speaking about whistleblowing, we have to mention Edward Snowden, who was absolutely fundamental in helping the public to know more about how countries and states conduct surveillance over the internet. In 2013, Edward Snowden revealed to journalists the extent and the capabilities of the United States to conduct surveillance over the internet. Also, Snowden was an insider. He was a former spy, we may say, a former employee of the National Security Agency in the US. And it's, again, only because someone from inside these black boxes revealed outside these very fundamental data information about how democracy works today to the outside in order to expose what was going on. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any access to this very crucial information. But also looking beyond whistleblowers and insiders, some very interesting news outlets, especially in the US, have started to conduct investigation about technology in different ways. The Markup is an excellent example of contemporary investigative journalism in the context of technology. The Markup only covers this issue, so it's a very specialized news outlet. And the Markup journalists have been able to conduct investigations into algorithms of Amazon, Facebook, and other companies in order to expose how these algorithms take decisions and how they actually work. And one thing that I've been doing was studying some practices of audience engagement by attracting their own readers into the investigative process. So for instance, here they created the Citizen Browser project, which is an actual browser that the Markup readers can use in order to contribute their own data about how social media mix the data, how social media analyzes their own data in order to structure an investigations into these powers. And the Markup is really specialized in this area, and they've been doing an egregious job in exposing the inner functioning of very socially impactful technologies. And as anticipated a few minutes ago, also activists and hackers have contributed sometimes in this area. What I mean here? Well, the practice of hacking has evolved recently, and it has brought up some examples of what Gabriella Coleman defines as the public interest hack. The public interest hack is basically an hacking activity. So hackers go into servers of companies, go into networks of institutions, not only for the fun of it, not only for the heck of it, but also to release the information they are able to find. So we have seen political hackers conduct these digital intrusions in order to basically steal information and reveal, again, secrets. The interesting side of public interest hacks and how they are related to journalism is that sometimes hackers are becoming sources for journalists, especially when it comes to black box technologies. And this is not the context to discuss the ethics of this kind of journalism, and we may want to do this during the Q&A that follows. But just imagine being an investigative journalist who is conducting an investigation into some technological companies, into some algorithms, very socially impactful, and an hacker comes to you and says, I got that information by hacking someone. Of course, it's a gray zone. Of course, it's a very complex ethical scenario, but some great work has been done by journalists thanks to the contribution of hackers. One example of this kind of hackers is definitely Finesse Fischer, who is this hacker represented by a puppet. Finesse Fischer, of course, is very into hacker humor and trolling, but he decided that when he wants to be in the media conducting interviews, he has to be personified by this puppet, which is, in my view, quite funny. But actually, why I'm talking to you about Finesse Fischer is that Finesse Fischer is a political hacker who, in the years, has contributed to the exposing of various companies who were selling surveillance technology to non-democratic countries, where these technologies were used to track journalists, activists, minorities, etc. I'm speaking about countries like Saudi Arabia or Iran or worse. So Finesse Fischer basically was exposing this business, which is in many cases illegal, and a variety of companies ended up in this situation. They were exposed, and their dirty business was, of course, also made public. And journalists have, in many cases, also investigated on the basis of this material. So just to come to some conclusion, I would like to give you some takeaways. The first one is that technological black boxes pose really crucial questions about how power can be expressed in technological terms and in how technology may impact on society and on civil rights in democracies, and of course also beyond. In this context of challenging question from democracy, of course we need the work of journalists to expose these problems and try to open these black boxes in technology in order to understand what is actually going on in between us and technology in the context of the Datafied Society. And exposing this inner mechanism sometimes leads to public intervention. So I think we need more regulation in regards to how surveillance technologies, for instance, are used in today's work. And this can start if you have an informed public discourse powered by clever and smart and ethical journalism. And of course, we also need to get rid of those too much optimistic view on technologies, because technology is not magical. It can't solve societal problems. Technology is constantly created by humans socially, and so the way in which we design technology will also design the impact it will have on society. And the context in which black box technology operates is a context of power imbalance. They know too much about us without us knowing enough about them, I would summarize. So these power imbalances are also very crucial social problems in most of the cases. And of course, opening these black boxes is difficult for journalists to have access to information, data, and crucial information can be very difficult through official channels. So sometimes radical transparency, like the one provided by hackers and activists, can be the only solution to answer to this veil of secrecies. And of course, hacking is a gray zone. It's not always ethical, but sometimes it's really the only way to pursue this kind of investigation. And when it comes to journalists, there is a great value in potential collaboration with these actors like whistleblowers, activists, and hackers. And of course, it is possible to do all this ethically, and that's the first important point. But the fact that these collaborations exist is a sign of how journalism is changing. Journalism is more hybrid today than ever, and in journalism, many things that were not considered as journalism until a few years ago are now considered normal, like the collaboration with hacker, the collaboration with activism, and of course, coding. And I would leave you then with this idea of think local, because sometimes when we discuss technology and black box and algorithms, etc., it always sounds like something far away, something that belongs to very powerful corporations, very powerful states, whatsoever. But actually, the impact of this technology can really be seen almost everywhere. And here in my slide, you see a picture of a facial recognition camera, part of a system that was installed in my hometown, just here in Como. So don't think that the impact of this reality of things is only visible in such a high level like Facebook or governments or other powers of that kind. But even in a small town like Como and in many others, you can see the actual impact of surveillance and black box technologies on society. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much, Philip. I think that, again, this is not a journalist course, and I'm really happy to also invite you because, again, we are trying to teach or to open critical thinking opinion to young student, young leader, the future young leader, in order to activate. That's why when you talk about hacking, in my mind, I remember also activate. And before passing to a Q&A, I would like to also present a framework. You talk about technology. I understand absolutely that the part of your research is based on the technology that provide this kind of control, or they provide this kind of social control or social possibility that then generate control. But coming back to the philosophical and etymological idea of techne, techne is always based on three perspectives. One is the purpose, and the purpose is always the same, it's control. The second keyword related to techne is related to energia. Energia is the dynamism, is the energy behind. And the energy is based on process, produce, progress. No? We control because we want to produce. We control because we want to progress in our society. And the third part of the meaning of techne, remember, purpose, energia, was material. Based on material was before in the philosophical or in our history, material was stone, wood, material was something related to the natural ecosystem. From my perspective, look like that today, when you talk about technology, or when the people like experts like you talk about technology in this field, the material is our mind. The material is our body. The material is our dream. The material is not, we became the stone. We became the material for this purpose, and we became the material for this energy. For my personal point of view, even if I think that purpose always wins, progress always wins, because we cannot stop this, is really dangerous when we transform our mind, our soul, our contradiction in material. But before continuing, I would like to share the screen because our student, they prepare some Q&A for you in order to resume. During this conversation, we talk about leadership, critical thinking, and creative thinking. And I would like to introduce the Q&A session with this provocation from Sun Tzu, that all the conflict, because also you talk about control and power, is a kind of deception. There is always something dark if you want to progress in the fight. That's why the first anomaly that our community want to propose to you is this. Please.
Good evening. I would like to start by quoting 2 of the 10 strategies of manipulation by the media by Noam Chomsky, and more specifically the number 7 and the number 8, which are keep the public in ignorance and mediocrity, and to encourage the public to be complacent with mediocrity. So my question is, we all know that knowledge is power, and we all want to pursue it. But how can we fight ignorance if it is fueled by those in power? Thank you.
Well, that's very a broad question. Thanks for bringing it up. I'm also an admirer of Noam Chomsky, so I appreciate also the question. Well, I think it would be very difficult to answer your question in full. So I will try to answer you through one specific case. And when we hear nowadays discussions about disinformation, fake news, and related issues, these are in most cases defined and identified and discussed as pure technological problems. So it is as if all fake news, all disinformation, and the problem itself were created with the creation of Facebook, for instance. Well, I'm completely in disagreement with these assumptions, because the problem with disinformation, fake news, it's not a technological one. Technology has definitely accelerated some previous and some way more older problems with how people are engaging with information and in how information is produced. So journalists and the news media have been publishing fake news forever. It is part of the job, unfortunately, and especially when it's done in goodwill, it is simply something that happens. And at the same time, though, disinformation and malicious disinformation and propaganda have also been always there. They also have found a place and a way to spread probably more faster on the internet, and definitely this is true, and we see that the amount of disinformation that is available online and on social media is enormous, but it's not a pure technological problems. Yet, the way in which platforms operate, the way in which Facebook operates, for instance, and this is probably closer to what I was saying during my presentation, they sometimes contributing to the circulation of fake news. We know that the Facebook algorithm, for instance, tends to reward content that it's really emotional, or that it's capable of creating more engagement. And this, of course, is fuel for the circulation of a very sensationalist or misleading content. So something that outrages us will definitely create more engagement, will definitely create more action from the users, and the Facebook algorithm will reward this success. So definitely, I disagree with those who say that it is because of the internet that we have fake news, etc. But at the same time, I would say that challenging the power of algorithms, challenging the powers that make Facebook so powerful is fundamental, because until we don't have enough evidence of how its own algorithms work, now they select and promote content over other, we won't have an answer to how fixing these issues. So it won't be only a technological solution, it will also be a policy and cultural and education solution, but there is a part of this discussion that is definitely also around technology. And I think that if we were able to open some of these black boxes, we would also know more about how these phenomena tend to spread and increase in particular.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Now we are ready to pass to the second anomaly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Okay, perfect. Sorry. Good evening. Okay, I have this question. Okay, nowadays the world is very complex. We have people who with different backgrounds that does right nowadays like different type of jobs. And my question is, to what extent does culture and educational background affect this decision-making in leadership?
Well, that's another very broad question. Thank you for raising it. And I think they impact a lot. They have they actually the basis of a lot of decisions that take place. And again, I will try to answer you by linking as much as I can your question to my presentation and to my topics of research. And I think the question you ask can also help us looking at other technologies like artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, it is not science fiction. It is not only about the robots. In most of the cases, artificial intelligence systems today are machine learning systems, which is basically data and data analysis. So when we have algorithms, which are in a sense artificial intelligence technology, who take decisions, like the Facebook algorithm takes decisions in regards to the content we see. The Google algorithms take decision around the content we find on Google, etc. And these are machine learning systems. The algorithms learn what to do on the basis of the data they can analyze. And this is a crucial point in which cultural and educational background play a part, because at the moment we are facing a problem in artificial intelligence in regards to biases in coding. I'll answer you with an example. A great American scholar, Sophia Noble, has conducted research about how the Google algorithms respond to certain search queries on the search engine. And she was able to find out that the Google algorithms was giving sometimes very racist answers. So for instance, if you were searching, and this is the example she conducted, if you were searching for 3 teenagers on Google Images, she was constantly realizing that the results were showing white teenagers having fun, white teenagers having a good time on vacation whatsoever, and all the black teenagers that were provided by the search results were under arrest, they were handcuffed and whatsoever. And of course, this is a racist response that Google was giving to that search query. And the reason why the Google algorithm was giving that racist answer is to be found in how the algorithm was programmed. So the data that was used to program that algorithm contained already some racial biases. Then the artificial intelligence was replicating in the outcomes it was providing with the search results. So I think that we are facing a problem in how artificial intelligence systems are being produced, because the cultural and educational background of those who are creating these systems will be reflected in how the artificial intelligence system will work. And at the moment, most of the production and research around these topics is happening in the Silicon Valley. So all these artificial intelligence systems, if they're not correctly monitored, if they are not constantly checked in a critical way to see whether they are not replicating these biases, will always reflect the world as it's seen by a privileged white man working in Silicon Valley, because that's the background and the culture of those who are creating artificial intelligence now in most of the cases in the Western world. And so we need more diversity, we need more cultural and educational backgrounds in order to create a different artificial intelligence. Otherwise, some of the problems that we have been discussed will be also replicated by AI pretty soon. And that can have another profound social impact on justice, rights, and whatsoever.
Good evening. My
Hello.
keyword is awareness. So nowadays, documentaries like The Social Dilemma that expose the social media side of surveillance capitalism have become increasingly popular. And terms like unplugging or digital detox entered our vocabulary. This means that some people have started to at least become aware of what could be behind these black boxes. And some of them maybe even started to change their attitude towards them. So I believe that we will get to a tipping point in which the majority of the population will realize what's behind the curtains. For sure, it will be a slow, gradual, maybe even painful process, like going up on a roller coaster. But if we get there, then what happens? So as a media expert, I'm asking you another broad question. To make some speculation, what do you think could potentially happen after we pass the tipping point? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Another good one. I totally agree that awareness is a crucial concept in this discussion, and all the examples that I provided you in the presentation, both the journalistic one and the activist ones, are aiming at bringing transparency in these systems and consequently more awareness in the public. So I share your view that there is a critical discussion going on, and these topics are now becoming more and more political in sense that they are considered as social problems and no longer as pure technological problems. And I think, though, that the tipping point is still far away. And this is because for decades, digitalization and digital platforms really were presented to the public in a very unquestioned way. Critical questions were not asked for years, and so they were unchallenged for years. And something has changed in the past, well, I would say 10 years. We have more scrutiny, we have more critical questions, we have more accountability in a sense, although it is still a long process until we reach an acceptable level in my view. But that's why I would say that the tipping point is still far away. Whether we reach that point, well, I'm a bit skeptical because I'm afraid that the powers that have been left able to become so powerful in the past 2 decades are now so much powerful that it's even difficult to imagine alternatives. It was not written in stone that surveillance capitalism that you mentioned and that the constant monetization of our data and emotions and activities on the internet had to become the only hegemonic model of how business is run on the internet. It was a decision. It was a business decision. It was a cultural decision. It was a long process, but that has really closed and made shrinking the spaces for alternatives. It's almost impossible now to imagine to find a real competitor for Google or a real competitor for Facebook. Facebook in particular has been very smart and fast and successful in buying all its own potential competitors and making their own. So I'm afraid that even if we reach that tipping point of awareness, that won't be much enough to change the state of things. And my other preoccupation is that all these very powerful big tech companies that were created for offering digital platforms are now becoming something else, and they are becoming the most powerful actors also in artificial intelligence, which is leading us back to my concerns in the previous question. So definitely we still need more awareness, and way too many technological black boxes are still closed. So we need, in my view, more journalism, more investigations, more activism in order to create more awareness, as you suggested.
Good evening. In this troubled with the internet, where everybody wants to be the first to put out news on the internet, in a time of fake and manipulative information, and where the quality of the news is almost irrelevant, how can journalism survive?
$1 million question in your case. Well, I would answer you probably in a surprisingly way. I think the journalism is fine. it's doing fine. It is not really disappearing. What is disappearing are newspapers, which is something that it's not the only thing that makes journalism today. Of course, the publishing press is in trouble now for decades. The economical problems of the field started way before the creation of the web and way before the success of social media. They definitely have made things way more complicated for those in the business of journalism, but the problems were already starting to arise before that moment. And in the contemporary economics of journalism, I think that one problem is created again by surveillance capitalism and in how it is possible to monetize attention on the internet. Most of the advertisement, which is still the most important source of income for most of the publishing companies all over the world, well, the advertisement on the internet is created on the basis of corporate surveillance. As much as Facebook is gathering data about its own users, when you read the news on the internet, you are constantly monitored by a variety of companies and players who have access to your browsing experience, to your browsing data whatsoever, to sell you and propose you a targeted advertisement. And of course, targeted advertisement and the success of it on the internet is based on the numbers of clicks, is based on the numbers of views, and etc. So even the most serious and prestigious newspaper in the world will have to operate in this system. And inevitably, they will be victims of it. Because in order to attract more traffic, you need to attract more people. And the best way and fastest and easiest way to do that is attracting them with nonsense and with very low quality content. And this is the state of things where we ended up. It was not written anywhere that, again, this was the only possible ways, but that's where we got. The good news is that in the past few years, the most smart and the most clever companies in the business of journalism have realized that that system was simply not working because it was bringing very little money and it was also lowering down the standards of their own journalism. So if you look now, all the most important and prestigious newspapers in the world are now coming back to asking money directly to the readers to sustain their own business. So in forms of either subscriptions or membership models or any kind of direct contribution. Well, it's a good sign because it means that progressively journalism is exiting that necessity of constantly generating traffic and attention and having a different source of income more stable from the readers and the subscribers. They have more resources to conduct a better job. And if you only look at the Italian newspapers, all the major ones are pursuing more digital subscriptions models, and newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post have saw their income on the internet skyrocketing since they implemented these systems. And in my view, it's a good sign because if we are able to at least take out journalism for this constant data extraction and data exploitation, I think we will do a better service to journalism itself and also to democracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So that's my question. So how much of your personality is destroyed and constructed by social media? So I started from the assumption that social media has really changed the way in which we live. And given its ubiquity in our life, it's really important to understand what kind of personality traits draw people towards social media and whenever social media changes our personality. We are in a sort of positive feedback loop because the more someone is reinforced for their narcissism, the more they will engage in that behavior. So social media is really putting us in a very self-destructive and even somewhat self-centered mindset, bringing us to constant destroy and involve ourselves. So when a positive feedback is not reached, we start to question ourselves and to change to be accepted. And you could take for granted that if you're doing good on social media and you are mostly accepted, you are fine and you will not change. But you're wrong, because there is always someone that is not liking you. Even if it's a small percentage, it's enough to shake your persona. So is there really a way to fully remain true to yourself when you start using social media? And also, how much of yourself remain after you start using those socials? Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. Also, this one is a very big one. And I'm afraid I don't have a very, I would say, scientific answer to your question, because I'm not a psychologist and I don't study technology in that point of view, which is anyway fundamental. But the thing I can tell you is that sometimes technologies and social media in particular are seen in a very deterministic way. There is a phenomenon called as technological determinism that is basically a bias. It is a cultural bias that makes us look at technology as if it was some kind of magical force that was able to shape society and our personalities directly, like a silver bullet. And in most of the cases, social media are framed in this way. And if you look at some headlines of the past few years, I'm sure you have read many of them claiming that Facebook and social media have destroyed democracy, that Facebook is responsible for the election of Donald Trump, is responsible for the Brexit, is responsible for anything we don't like in the world. And again, I'm pretty sure now you have a feeling that I'm very critical towards Facebook, but yet I don't think that Facebook has any magical power. It is not technology that changes society directly. You always have to think at technologies as part of way more profound and structured social, political, and economical dynamics. So there isn't anything so powerful in social media that is capable of changing society per se. Social media are always kind of a megaphone, of course, but they also kind of an amplifying lens of the society. So when we discuss, for instance, the impact of social media on teenagers' behavior. Of course, there is a percentage of them who will, I don't know, maybe suffer of addiction, suffer of behavioral problems connected to too much usage of social media, but we can't claim on this that social media is changing our brain or that the internet is making us more stupid. It is not because of the technology. It is because of other factors and other players who are interconnected to technology that we have impacts on society. But sometimes also when, and I was partially already saying this in the question about fake news and disinformation, also when we think as technology as the solution to our problems, we should always be aware that technology can't fix problems by itself. It is in a broader consideration of technology in the context where it is implemented that we may find a solution. So I would suggest to all of you to always be skeptical when you hear too much deterministic or way too positive views around technologies. For instance, to imagine to fix the disinformation problems only by asking Facebook to do something won't change anything. All these issues have to be changed with education and awareness, as you were suggesting before. And we need basically to train people to live with technology. And I think that in the past years, the idea of the digital natives have created lots of confusion and issues, because no one knows or no one is born by knowing how technology works. Well, maybe younger people can have more skills. They can be faster and more effective in learning and how to use the tools. But this doesn't mean that they also are aware of what is going on. This doesn't mean that they know how technology works, how it is impacting on the reality, and we need education to do that. So I always would encourage you to think about technology as the result of more profound dynamics, which are mostly economical, social, and political.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Philip. Now, if we have a time, if we have an extra session of question, if there is someone from the audience, from the student, they want to ask something to Philip based on the lecture, based on some Q&A from the colleague, there is someone that want to ask something? In this case, I want to ask you something because I prepare, I don't know if it's a question, it's an extra conversation. That's why I put X anomaly. And in order to express you this, my personal anomaly, I would like to present you this case, I don't know, probably we can call case studies. Probably you know this. This is something happened 2 years ago, but based on this, happen a lot of challenge like this on the social media, or let me say in the Western social media, because all this conversation until now we are talking about Facebook, Insta. This is something that is happening in the Western society, because then there is another society that is what I call the Chinese society. They use other kind of tools, but probably today we have no time to touch just a little, or probably we can try after this. Anyway, 2 years ago, pop up in the social media this challenge, and became a massive challenge. Like all the people, they participate with this challenge to post something based on how I look like 10 years before. And okay, we can judge this like positive, deterministic, like you mentioned before, or negative, or critical thinking. But I would like also to add you this. What's happened that this phase, this person, or let me be more provocative, this material, before we talk about techne, with purpose, energia, and material, this material are fake. Why are fake? Because this material, this face, this person, this profile, we can say, are created by an intelligent artificial, and probably you know this website, this person are not real, this person doesn't not exist. And my question is, are you scared about this? There are connection between the black box that you mentioned, the critical analysis, or be skeptical like you mentioned before, or is only a pure speculation and there are no connection between this challenge and these activities? Thanks so much, Phil.
I think we can easily conclude that the 10 years challenge that was launched by Facebook was an attempt by Facebook to train its own algorithms. And anything that is published on Facebook is definitely used by Facebook itself for monetarization necessity. It's used by Facebook to make more money, but it's also used, all this data that they have been gathering since Facebook was created, it's also being used to train artificial intelligence system. Well, Facebook has one, it has many, but one of the most interesting one for this conversation is the one that recognizes your friends in your pictures and suggests you who these persons in the images may be, suggesting their own names, just because the algorithms is recognizing people from other images. So I'm not sure whether it was then even announced, but I think we can conclude that all those images that were published for the challenge were also used to train an artificial intelligence system to recognize faces. And facial recognition is a very controversial and dangerous, for sure, technology in my view. Of course, these are corporate examples whatsoever, but facial recognition is also a technology that it's used for law enforcement, that it's used for social control, that it's used all around the world. I was mentioning Como in my presentation, but we are just one example. And it's a very controversial technology because, again, the crucial part of it is how facial recognition is trained, how facial recognition is structured, and to which data it is structured on. And if the data is biased, if the data and the coding process include the biases of those humans who created the technology, then it will replicate. And there is now plenty of evidence that has been published by academics and also by public institutions, particularly in the US, that most of the facial recognition system that it's being used in public spaces, they do have biases. They are less performative when it comes to recognizing people of color. And when they have to take decisions, they also take decisions on a racially influenced way. There was an example of a software that was used in the US in courts to supporting judges in making decisions. And there was an algorithm calculating the hypothetical capability of one single individual to commit another crime. Well, it was found out by an investigation conducted by ProPublica, which is an extraordinary news outlet in the US, that the algorithm that was taking that decision, that was assigning a label to people saying you are a potential criminal, this machine was taking decisions in a racially influenced way because the data that was used to train the algorithm was racially biased by itself. And it was based on criminal records of the US themselves, where people of color tend to be arrested many more times than white ones because of the intrinsic and systemic racial biases of the US society. So yes, I am scared, in particular when it comes to facial recognition, but there are some good news. There is now a law proposal in the Italian parliament about a moratorium on facial recognition system in public spaces because the problems and the issues and the controversies are way more visible than the actual positive side of the technology. And the data authority, Il Garante per la Privacy, today has expressed a very critical view around the facial recognition system, that it's now in the hands of the police in Italy, and it defined it as a mass surveillance technology that requires more scrutiny when used. So again, as you can see, no technology is a destiny. We are not inevitably going through a specific technological scenario. It is possible to challenge these dynamics, and I think that we still need more of this, as I was saying during my presentation.
Thanks so much, Philips. In order to conclude, I put some keyword because following your speech and also some keyword, probably I make some mistakes, but today, thanks to your time, thanks to your lecture, and also thanks to the Q&A from our student, we talk about power, we talk about identity, we talk about boundaries, we talk about influence and the role of social media in influencing this. We talk about access to this. We talk about opportunity. Some opportunity can be positive, some opportunity can be negative, and we talk about mobility. All this connection, all this keyword was more or less based on your lecture. And if I may, I would like to, first of all, thanks so much for your time, because it's 1 hour that we have this conversation. And I would like, if you can, and let me select this slide, because I would like to talk with you about China. I know that you are a great expert in journalism, media, society, the role of social media, technology, and you also described this during your speech. But in China, we have other kind of social media, like WeChat, Baidu, and okay, it's not easy because we cannot resolve the problem today. But my question is, I understand that in the Western society there are people like you, or also like our students, that they are thinking in a kind of critical way to say, pay attention. Also, when you mention about the camera control in Como, and pay attention because thinking local. No, this happen also not in a big corporation, but also around your house in a small territory. But in China, look like that the people don't pay attention to this, or this is only part of the society. My question is, what do you think about the role of this social media control in Asia, or let me reframe, in China, compared to, for example, what is happening in the Western society? It's a huge, complex question, but some keyword. Because again, I'm really curious because talking also with my friends, probably you don't know, but I spent part of my career in China. And when I asked to them, but are you scared? No, also the same question that I asked to you, are you scared about this? They say to me, no, it's okay. It's normal. It's part of our way of living. We are too much. The only way to continue progress is also using this. That's why I would like to ask you, what do you think about this? Thanks so much.
Well, it's another big question, and unfortunately, I'm not an expert of social media usage in Asia. But I think that, in my view, we need to look at China with all things considered. And of course, China is not a democracy. It is an authoritarian country, and it is a very technological country. Now, China hosts the most powerful supercomputers in the world. It hosts some of the most powerful companies when it comes to technology, and it is really a technological superpower. Yet, the fact of not being a democracy, the fact of not having the open society that we have in the Western context also influenced the way in which the internet is working down there in China. And what I am always interested in a scary way is how Western technological companies are more increasingly looking at China to find ideas. And you mentioned WeChat. WeChat is not only a chat platform. It is a platform for doing almost anything in China. Myself, I've been in China for visiting and tourism a couple of years ago, and you basically was doing anything through WeChat or other similar system. You can pay your taxes, you can call a taxi, you can pay a restaurant, you call your friends. Everything happens inside WeChat. And if you look at how Facebook behaved in the past 15 years, it's going in the same direction, because the aim of Facebook is to have us inside its own products, inside its own platforms for the most time it is possible to imagine. So this is the reason why Facebook bought Instagram, and the reason why Facebook bought WhatsApp is to transfer all our experience of the web within spaces that are owned by Facebook. And this is basically the WeChat approach. And I think that Mark Zuckerberg would be amazed to have Facebook substituting the entire open web and have us do anything we do online within Facebook products. And that's really scares to me, because it brings us to the Chinese scenario, brings us to the complete elimination of any alternative, as I was saying, answering to a previous question. And then again, when it comes instead to political control and now surveillance, it's used by the Chinese authorities to monitor people and to keep minorities under control. Well, that's the example of how tyranny can be applied in our era. And technology there is, an important driver. Facial recognition is omnipresent in China for control. Basically, every square meters in Beijing is constantly monitored by cameras, most of which are connected to facial recognition system. And as I said before, facial recognition is absolutely a controversial and dangerous technology. And I'm not surprised that a tyranny is using it so extensively. And I'm scared because sometimes when we discuss facial recognition here in Europe, here in Italy, we look at China as a viable example. And that it's not a good sign of how socially impactful technologies are developing. So I think that it is really problematic if established democracy look at China for technological solution.
Thanks so much, Philip. I think that if we don't have any other question from the students, on behalf of IULM, I would like to say thanks so much for your time. You are so kind because you spend more or less more than 1 hour to discuss, to share your idea, to also to replicate some question. And for the rest of the community, we will continue our class in our session. And thanks so much, Philip, for your time. Thanks so much to IULM, to the technical office, to the international office. And I always suggest to the people to follow IULM Flow online because the next week we will have other appointment online. Philip, thanks so much for your time, and hope we can start a better conversation in the future based on this activity. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks again for the invitation, and in particular for your question, and see you soon. Bye.